Um, some good updates. Some good updates. There seems to be an increasing consensus that people at low risk should not be getting extra boosters, believe it or not. I see that being gradually growing. They're particularly for now talking about young people, saying that due to the pre-existing shots and or illness, additional vaccines probably don't give us much benefit. And so the idea is to restrict the follow-up boosters to an older adults or people at risk. I'm expecting it's not a final suggestion, so it's not necessarily like a hard and stone, but I'm seeing a push to it. There's been a couple of really interesting publications advocating for it, and there are news articles that are coming out. So that's my one news. The second is there's a study been published a couple of days ago in British Medical Journal. Unfortunately, for some reason, I can't get the actual study. I'm probably going to review the study on my YouTube channel because I want to give it a proper due diligence to go into numbers. But it looks like the good news is what I remember what I hinted last week at, that people with long COVID, seemingly the newer long COVID from Omicron seems to be better. So patients who have been getting the long COVID more recently, not in the first year and a half, seemingly doing better. And so this is a publication that confirms it. It's a publication from Israel, from pretty large research institute there. And they analyzed a very large number of people, over 1 million, those who had COVID and then subsequently developed some symptoms that consistent with long COVID. And basically, in short, within a year, almost everybody resolved. So that's a good news. So I'm going to post, as I said, I don't have a link yet to the actual article, so I'll just post the NBC article in the chat. And that's all for the updates. So, you know, the drill, drop the questions into the chat box. If you don't want to do that, feel free to raise your hand. We'll give you the turn to unmute and ask the question. No questions. Really? Well, that's good. Everybody understand everything and don't need anything to ask. All right. I have a weird question. I don't know if people would be comfortable saying this. Oh, I see a question. Sheila has a question. Okay, Sheila, go ahead, ask your question, and then I'll see if I have got to ask mine.
This is kind of future. Can you give some type of psychological person to talk about the psychological aspects of masking? And when I say that, some people are still kind of masking, but the whole thing seems to not be masking now. It seems to be some.
I understand exactly.
You know what I mean? It seems to be some ideas, and I don't know what they are, that non-masking is just, you know, we don't have to do it anymore. The thing is still around, but, you know, folks seem to be unafraid as they were in the beginning. But then there's some people that are much more guarded. So to me, there seems to be a psychological something going on relative to people's thinking of masking or not masking, even though this virus is still very much out there and all of that. So I would like to hear somebody's psychological perspective of the folks who mask and those who you know, mask more. Those who don't, you know, because like when I'm outside or whatever, I don't mask, but when I go in, I pretty much do, but I'm like the only one sometimes looks like I'm around. I'm the only one with a mask on. You know, and it has a psychological thing on me. You know what I mean?
I think it's a great idea. And we will look for someone who can speak for both ends, for both sides, because.
Exactly, because I'm trying to understand.
Yeah, because I think it's quite easy to say, you know, people don't mask for no good reason and kind of say whatever. But I think there's been a lot of psychological fatigue. A lot of people are not masking because they're just fed up. And as the basically the severity of illness generally has been decreasing, I think there's been less and less push. But I think it's a really important topic, actually. So
Yeah,
we'll see if we can
I would
find someone.
get somebody's opinion on it.
I
But
wonder, Janet, what do you think? I wonder if Victoria would take that on. I think she'd be a great person. I don't know if she would need to do a research on this of some sort. All right, we'll think about it. Great point. Thank you. I can't believe Elle just dug this out. The funny part, I showed up to class once, I walk in, and the moment I get to the podium and I start talking, they put this video in the background. I think this is the only time I ever blushed. Not that I'm actually quite proud of this. I think it was done well. Anyway, anybody is interested, you can click on this after or during, whatever. All right, well, I don't think there's any more questions today, which is fine because we can either end early and Jennifer can have as much time as she needs, and then I'll lead the practice after.
Okay, so I'm ready. I'm going to share my screen. I just made like a couple little slides here. So you all can tell me if you can see this. Let me make it into a slideshow version. Okay, so I just wanted, this is a little known thing about Ayurvedic medicine that is very useful, is not necessarily represented in other systems of medicine. And so I wanted to just offer some information on this today. So oleation means internal and external lubrication via therapeutic oils or constitutionally appropriate oils. And it's something that we make a lot of use of in Ayurvedic medicine. And it comes in a variety of forms. So internal oleation, typically with ghee. Ghee is clarified butter. So ghee is kind of considered a little bit of a wonder substance in Ayurveda because many oils are warming or heating, and ghee is actually cooling, even though it's an oil. And even though it's an oil, it has the ability to stoke digestive fire and help burn fat instead of accumulate fat. So it is used in a lot of instances, but it basically will lubricate all the tissues of the GI tract, which helps for nutrient absorption. When we have dried out intestines, we don't absorb very well, but also that lubrication helps to dislodge, kind of liquefy and dislodge undigested food particles and things that are kind of laying on the intestinal walls and creating toxins. Toxins interfere not just with nutrient absorption, but over time it can create kind of a barrier where the tissue just can't really breathe. And then sometimes one can get leaky gut, and then you're in a pattern of you can get in a cyclical pattern where, when we have leaky gut, we don't absorb B vitamins. And when we're not absorbing B vitamins, the integrity of the intestinal wall is further reduced. So we want to avoid that whenever possible. And it just helps with elimination. You can have ghee in different quantities depending on your constitution. So Vata is dry by nature. So a Vata predominant person would have more ghee. A Pitta predominant person would have a kind of moderate amount, and a Kapha predominant person would have the least amount because they're already more tending towards the oily, unctuous side of things in terms of their constitution. So that's a little bit about ghee. Now, ghee is used therapeutically, but it's also just a nice part of a regular diet. And it is totally fine for people that have dairy problems because the dairy proteins are removed in the clarification of the butter. So that is another beneficial thing about it. Now, external oleation also comes in a number of forms, but one of the ones that we use in Ayurveda is called abhyanga, and that is can be either self-directed or So I don't know if this comment is for me, but we could talk about that afterwards if that is for me. You can either have that be self-directed or received. So you always want to use a constitutionally appropriate oil. And we could talk about that a little more later, but is the oil cooling, warming, heating? Is it heavy? Is it dense? Is it a light oil? So a kapha predominant person would want to use a light oil, but kapha is cool by nature. So just as an example, coconut oil is both light and cool. So it's appropriate for kapha in one way and inappropriate in another way. Similarly, sesame oil is more warming or heating by nature. So a pitta predominant person would not use that. Pitta is also light by nature. So sesame oil is a little heavy, sorry, not sesame oil. You might want a slightly heavier oil. Sunflower oil is kind of on the light side, but it's cooling, so it can be appropriate for pitta. So it just depends. Now, Ayurvedic massage, particularly when it's for the purposes or part of a more elaborate detox regimen, we always work from the periphery to the core, and that's because the idea in Ayurveda, part of what happens when there's imbalance is that the doshas live naturally in the organs of the GI tract. So kapha lives in the stomach, pitta lives in the small intestine, vata lives in the GI tract. They also exist in a lot of other organs of the body. For instance, pitta is in the eyes, and vata is in the pelvis. And so, there's an elaborate map of where the doshas kind of have specific locations in the body, but their original seat is within the GI tract. So when there is imbalance in the body, the doshas leak out of the digestive organs and into the other tissues of the body. So one thing that happens in detox massage is that working from the periphery back to the core helps to dislodge toxins from the peripheral tissues and bring them back to the intestines for elimination. So for instance, in a panchakarma massage, you have two therapists. They're each working one side of the body simultaneously, and they're working from the periphery of the core to bring the doshas that have escaped the GI tract back for the purposes of elimination. And oftentimes there are, so the motion are synchronized, and there are kind of designated multiples of strokes that are done in different areas of the body. For self-massage, which is often encouraged, especially for vata conditions, because vata is dry by nature. And so, Western medicine obviously, doesn't categorize conditions by quality the way that Ayurveda does. But anytime you see an aspect of dryness, that's a time to use therapeutic oil. So for instance, one of the locations of vata is in the ears, and tinnitus is, according to Ayurveda, considered to be a result of the drying out of the inner structure of the ear. So we put 2 drops of warm sesame oil in each ear as a therapeutic remedy for tinnitus. That's just one example. You can use oils in the eye for dry eye. We have, I don't know if anyone's ever seen this, but there are various conditions under which you will just basically build a moat of a certain type of flower around a location of the body. So it's done around the eye. It's also done on the low back for low back pain. There are a variety of places that it can be done. But then you pour warm ghee into that moat, and it just sits there. And for the eye, it's done with the eye open. So the eye is maximally absorbing that oil. And that's therapeutic for that long-term chronic dryness that has developed in the tissue. For self-massage, the patient is given either a medicated or constitutionally appropriate oil. And oftentimes that includes essential oils. And they just do a full body massage, head to toe. And they're meant to do that as an act of self-love and self-compassion. And typically pre or post shower. And you can do that, 3 to 5 times a week. Or the other thing is, if that is somehow challenging for someone, you can just do the soles of the feet and the top of the head. Some people don't like to have oily hair. So, we just work with whatever the client's comfort level is. But depending on the nature of the condition, it can be very beneficial to oil the head. So sometimes we try to work with people to get over that. Westerners seem to have a kind of a fear of oils, which is, so we sometimes have to work with that. All right, let's see. Oop. So Shirodara is a therapy we use a lot in Ayurveda and also in Panchakarma. And this is a continuous warm stream of sesame oil is common, or a combination of sesame or sunflower oil. It can be other oils in the middle of the forehead at approximately the location of the third eye. So this therapy is great for mostly Vata and Pitta type conditions, less so for Kapha, but it's great for insomnia. It basically calms the nervous system and the mind, and it enhances self-awareness. It's good for headaches, nervous system disorders, insomnia, and is considered nourishing and revitalizing to the subtle body, the endocrine system, and the vital immune principle. Sorry for that typo. And so types of typically used oils. So just a few examples: sunflower is cooling, sesame is warming, castor oil is often used for detox. We also use it for PMS, for cramping. So it's a very good oil with a warm compress for menstrual issues. Walnut oil is nourishing. Neem is a specific type of oil. More people know about it now, but it was a traditional Ayurvedic oil. People use it on their plants to, repel bugs, but it's used in Ayurvedic medicine for more kapha type conditions, and sometimes for toxicity. But it's very, very cold. If you had some and you put it on your skin, you would notice it has an extreme cold quality. It's bitter. As an oil, it's more on the dry side, and it's kind of it's very pungent. It has a very strong smell. Essential oils are used therapeutically based on whatever the patient's imbalance is. So again, they have all the same qualities. Oils can even be, they can be liquid or dry. They can be warm or cold. They can be heavy or light. I used to do. People who are very good at understanding the qualities of oils and foods are little kids. They really don't have they haven't developed a lot of preconceived notions. So you can usually give a little kid, like in an elementary school or something, have them smell an oil, and they tend to get it spot on. What are the qualities of the oil? Because they're using sort of their intuition and their natural understanding of environmental qualities. So medicated oils in Ayurveda include Mahanarayan oil, which is a very specific oil for aching joints and muscles and arthritis and things like that. And then another example is there are all kinds of medicated ghee, but one of them is Brahmi ghee. And Brahmi is a botanical that is specific to the mind and to some degree the nervous system, and for memory and things like that, clarity of mind. So you can cook these botanical medicines in the ghee and then strain it, and it has the properties also of those botanical medicines within it. So oftentimes those are prescribed as well. And I think the last one is just, so the picture is kind of, we do a lot of tongue diagnosis, but this is just to show you, this is not a super dry tongue, but you can see here, this tongue is kind of dry. So if you want to look at your own tongue after we're done here, you go to the mirror, take a peek at your tongue and see what you see there. Does your tongue look dry, moist? What is the color? Does it have a coating, etc.? So some contraindications for oleation might be the very, very young, the very, very old, although typically, we do oil massage on babies, lie them in a sunny place in the house and, oil them up. So it's more specific to if something's going on with the young person. But sometimes elderly people, it may not be appropriate. Really deep-seated toxins, you really have to work with the person before oiling them up, because you can drive things deeper. So that's a cautionary item. Certain conditions of debility, you have to be, again, careful, and it needs to be on an individualized basis. Certain mental health conditions, specifically Shirodara or something like that, can be a concern if the person has a very unstable mind. So excess kapha, really high kapha, or tamas. Tamas is a guna, a quality in yoga and Ayurveda, which is associated with a lot of sluggishness. It's the quality responsible for initiating sleep. So it's a very sluggish, slow, dense, kind of problematic. It's also very important and useful for life. We all need to sleep, but in excess, it can be very problematic, and oil can increase that quality. Or a person who's morbidly obese is probably not a good candidate for abhyanga, for instance. You don't want to be oiling up the body because there's not good natural detox processes, and there may be, the skin may not be breathing as well as we might like. So that's kind of all I wanted to share with you, and I'm happy to answer any questions that might come up.
I have a really good question. Really concerning one
Mm-hmm.
about the oil we should use in cooking.
Mm-hmm. Well, it depends on your constitution. So you should use oil that is appropriate for, we always treat the imbalance in Ayurveda. You should use the oil that is appropriate to your imbalance. And if you're not working with an imbalance therapeutically, then you use the oil that is appropriate for your constitution. So for instance, if someone has a Pitta constitution, sunflower oil is a good oil to cook with. If somebody has a Vata constitution, sesame oil is a good oil to cook with. Olive oil is said to aggravate kapha to some degree. So that's not always the best oil for somebody with a kapha predominant constitution. But it very much depends. And if you're not dealing with an imbalance, you can kind of mix it up by either meal, or mix oils even in the same meal, to just make sure you're getting kind of a balanced picture of the most beneficial qualities of the oil.
Like you can have different people in your family, and the cooking is done mostly because as a whole. So how can you address this? And first is like someone asked in the chat also, how to determine your constitution, and then how to choose the best in interest of the whole family.
Yeah. So when you're working with a family, it's always about navigating the best path for everyone. If you have somebody who's really struggling with some kind of condition, then I would say to prioritize that person's needs. You don't want to do something that is imbalancing to the rest of the family, but also, constitutional types are to some degree genetic. And so imbalances are more environmentally induced, but constitutional types are more or less genetic. So not to say everyone in the family may have the same constitution, but there are likely to be multiple members of the family with similar constitutions. So you just need to sort of learn what the lay of the land is in terms of the constitutions of people in your home. And, I would do that with an Ayurvedic practitioner. Some people like to use those paper tools, and honestly, they're kind of problematic. Most people identify with their imbalance, so that doesn't tell you what your constitution is. And it can be, they sometimes need a certain amount of interpretation. So I would find somebody to work with who can help you understand your constitution, the constitution of your families. That's kind of my best advice there. But if there's somebody dealing with a significant imbalance, then I think it's okay to prioritize that person's needs for a period of time, as long as it's not aggravating to someone else in the family, aggravating doshically, right? Not in the typical sense of aggravation.
So in general, you suggested some advantages of using ghee over oils. So is it a good thing to cook in ghee than oil?
Ghee is good to cook with. You can also put ghee on top of your food, mix it in your food. So if you're making a soup or a stew, you can mix it in. And then you just need to think about volume and quantity. So a kapha person might just never have more than a tablespoon a day, but a person with vata or with some kind of vata imbalance they're dealing with, sometimes they might have a tablespoon at every meal. So they could have up to 3 tablespoons. So, you know, you don't want to go crazy with ghee if you have a house full of kapha predominant people, because that might not be appropriate. But in general, ghee is very beneficial to most constitutions in moderation. I would put those kind of qualities.
Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
And avocado oil is beautiful.
I have a question. It may not be, this is Salome. I don't know if you can hear me.
Okay.
Can you hear me? I have a question. It may not be related to what you are saying and doing. I have always been curious. In Eritrea and Ethiopia cuisine, we clarify the batter with spices. You may put on holy basil, garlic, ginger, I don't know, onions, whatever.
Yeah.
So I'm always wondering, like, what's the difference between ghee and the one we clarify the batter, but we put spices in it.
So you
It
put
may not be in your area, but I'm just curious.
Yeah, so you put spices in it to stay in the ghee, or just as you're cooking a meal?
No, we put it in clarifying the batter. When we're clarifying the
While
batter,
you're clarifying the butter. Yeah, I mean,
we
that's,
put the spices in.
yeah. And I
Then,
think
of course, we strain it and so on and throw the stuff out.
right. It's basically the same as a medicated, it's a spiced ghee. I would call it a spiced ghee. It's similar to a medicated ghee when you would cook, you know, the herbs in the ghee slowly so that they take on the properties of the botanical medicine. So I think that's very, you know, that's a very culturally and gastronomically smart thing to do. You're getting the benefits of the spices in kind of a more, so ghee basically becomes a delivery vehicle. It's the same thing in Ayurvedic medicine. We use ghee as a delivery vehicle for botanical medicine because as a substance itself, it has certain properties that help to deliver the medicine to the targeted tissues in a way that is optimal. So for instance, just what you're talking about, say you put ginger in ghee, or ginger is a carminative spice. And so it will target the digestive system when it goes in. Say you have, you know, cinnamon or something. Well, cinnamon is specific to the heart. And so you know, botanicals are very intelligent beings. Plants are these really intelligent beings. So if you encase the properties of the botanical inside a delivery vehicle that is therapeutic in its own way, and you know, put something that is like cinnamon that is specific to the health of the heart, it finds its way. You know, it's kind of like, what do I want to say? It's a very different delivery mechanism than, say, water. You know, we can see that when something is delivered in a fat, it has a very different action in the body than delivered in something like water or as a tea infusion, something like that. So.
Okay, thank you. I was always curious, so that's.
Yeah, no, I think that's it's basically, you know, kitchen table medicine. Okay. You know, it's health promotion and prevention, I would say, is that practice, you know?
Well, yeah, some people use it like medicine. If somebody has some issues in certain ways, they might give them just a little bit of the clarified batter. I don't remember how it's used, but it's interesting. Thank you for clarifying that for me.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay.
So I just want to say, I don't understand the comment about butyrate. I don't know if that was about ghee. So avocado oil is lovely and is relatively tridoshic, so you can use it for any, it is a little kapha provoking, so you have to be careful if you have a kapha predominant constitution, but it's very nourishing. It's very sort of neutral in some of its qualities, but it is a bit on the heavy side, but it's not heating. So I think avocado oil is a great option. I'm not sure what VM is. Garlic is antibacterial, antifungal, viral. And so garlic oil is great for all of those things, including ear infections. And yes, you can put that directly in the ear. You can put a clove of garlic in your ear for that matter. And sometimes, you know, that's a good thing to do with a little kid. neem affecting virility when taken orally.
I want to know what ale is meaning by butyrate in there.
Yeah, I don't know.
What is the point there? I mean, yeah, ghee has butyrate, but why did you say that? I mean, it's a good thing. Butyrate is a very important support for a normal bacterial flora, but amount of butyrate in the ghee is very small. Usually when I give people sodium butyrate for the restoration of the flora or for support, the doses are massive.
Right. And I think that's when you have a pathology or something you're trying to correct. But the thing about ghee, if you use it for health promotion and prevention, and you do it diachronically over time, it will prevent that problem because it's promoting in the environment something that is useful, which in a therapeutic situation, may need to be administered at a much higher dose. So, and the neem, excuse me, so neem in very high volume can affect virility. So for instance, monks would use neem to suppress sexual desire and things like that. I mean, that's kind of some mythology around neem. But it's because you have to understand, it's because the qualities of neem, which is so cold and so drying, and ojas, which is the principle of immunity in the body, but it's also the principle of procreation. It's a material substance that makes the environment for procreation possible. And it also is kind of like the sap of sexual desire. Neem is so drying and so cold and so bitter that it will just dry that up, kind of squash that out. But that's in really high volume doses. It's not going to do that at the dose that you use it therapeutically in Ayurveda. So, and if anybody has that concern, they just express it to their provider, but providers know, kind of what a reasonable dose would be. And neem would not be something you would use long-term. You would use it short-term for really specific, it's very good for certain rashes and certain fungal skin conditions and things like that. So, and certain pitta conditions. Cold sensation in the middle of your forehead at times. It probably just depends on the person. You could be activating your third eye, depends what type of yoga you're doing. It depends, if it's related to meditation. I think that's you probably need a little more context of the individual, what their practices are to interpret that. How to determine your constitution, like I said, I think it's best to work with somebody to do that. It's really hard to, it's just like self-diagnosing or something. You might be right and you might not. So work with somebody who kind of has the skill set to help you determine that. Self-test online. Yeah. So those can be problematic because, like I said, people identify with their imbalance and then they become a bit confused. And also, a proper Ayurvedic practitioner will ask you questions short-term and long-term. They'll ask you what you were like as a child. There's a thing in Ayurveda called Vikruti encroaching prakriti, which means that, there are times, which are not enormously common, but when people are quite ill or have been dealing with something chronic for a long time, they can begin to resemble their imbalance rather than their constitution. And that, unless you're trained to understand how that happens, it's something that they can be misassessed for their constitution, and which will cause problems in terms of therapeutics. So there's all kinds of places you can go to get these treatments. They're everywhere, but what I would say about that is don't go anywhere without checking out, do they have an Ayurvedic practitioner on staff? Is that person certified by the National Ayurvedic Medical Association? And what level are they certified at? Because there are 3 levels of Ayurvedic healthcare providers. One is a Ayurvedic wellness counselor, which is basically like an Ayurvedic health coach. The second is an Ayurvedic practitioner, and the third is an Ayurvedic doctor. They have differing scopes of practice. And you need to be, if you are working with some kind of diagnosis or pathology, you want to go to the top two. Not the scope of the Ayurvedic health counselor is not to treat pathology. So you really have to do a little bit of homework to understand what is appropriate training. And similarly with herbs, you know, just buying herbs online, you know, to some degree, if you're healthy, you can experiment a little. Oh, I took triphala and this is what happened. But I don't recommend people reading about herbs and then trying to self-administer them for anything therapeutic. They are, according to Ayurveda, they're going to be herbs that are beneficial and not beneficial. And that's according to both your constitution and your imbalance. When we treat an imbalance, we have to take into consideration the constitution so as to not aggravate other things while we're treating the primary complaints. So yeah, so I think Ayurvedic herbs are fabulous and very effective, but it's important to really have them within the context of proper assessment and treatment protocols.
All right. Thank you, Jennifer, so much. So let's unshare the screen, and if you have any questions left, maybe leave them in the chat, and we can, Jennifer maybe can message them back to you if it's a direct question, or if you have other questions, we can maybe do them next week. So today we're going to do a pretty unusual practice. This is what we call a light practice, or light field breathing practice. It's originated from one of my teachers, and it's pretty old and kind of pretty simple technique. You don't have to do any special breathing, but there's a lot of visualization that's involved. So what I invite you to do is to make sure you're comfortable. Actually, you can lay down for this practice because it doesn't really involve necessity of being vertical. And if laying down helps you to be more present to your thoughts, that's actually preferred. So, and with that, if you choose to getting seated, make sure you're comfortable. Let's kind of relax our necks and upper backs, and make sure you find your position that's fully supportive. If you have any tension left, see if you can take a minute to release it. Once you're comfortable, go ahead and close your eyes. And before we actually begin, let's just start concentrating on our breath. Pay attention to how your rib cage is rising with each inhale. We try to trace down how the air enters through your nose. See how each breath affects different parts of your body. If your thoughts are still racing, if you're thinking of something from earlier in the day or from another day, you don't have to push it aside. Just keep trying to concentrate on the breath. And so now we'll begin with the meditation on light. So imagine you're sitting in front of a very bright light. Look straight into that light and let your whole being be saturated with this light. If you're a very visual person, you can think of a particular source of light, maybe a sun, maybe your favorite candle, or a fireplace or a stove, any source of light. First of all, be aware of the glow of the light on your body. You can sense it hitting your face, your chest, your arms. See if you can sense the warmth. See if you can sense if your body changes based on the sensation of the light hitting it. And if you happen to be outside, you can just orient yourself towards the source of sun, wherever it is. And if you're inside, you can also just imagine that if it helps you. And so now become aware of light penetrating into your skin, into the cells within your body. As we know, any light contains usually more than one light frequency. Whether light is visible or not, it always penetrates into our body, and some light penetrates very little, but some, like infrared, can penetrate many inches inside. So this theory will help you to make this visualization literal. It's not just thinking of it, it's an actual awareness that any light, when it hits our surface of our bodies, will penetrate inside. And now shift your attention to experience of feeling the light illuminating your mind and beginning to transfigure your thoughts and your emotions. So you're totally immersed in this power of light. Remember, light in itself is neutral, right? It doesn't necessarily bring positive or negative changes. It simply is. And so when you feel any shift in your thoughts and your feelings, don't get hung up onto whether they're positive or negative. It doesn't matter. You're simply experiencing the light. That's the practice. So for now, for the moment, you are totally passive with respect to the action of light upon you. And experiencing what happens when one is exposed to very strong light. Either one closes oneself up to protect oneself, or one opens oneself up to it and letting the light to go deeper and deeper. If it helps, you can literally think you're taking a shower or bath of light. And you're cleansed with this light, washed with it. There's no part of yourself that can be hidden from this light. If there's any internal struggle, dishonesty, anything like that, just let it be blasted by the light. If it helps, you can feel yourself being a crystal. Crystals just let the lights through. Comes in one way and then comes out on the other. That may help you to allow for the light to penetrate deeper and deeper. So now that we've done this first stage, we are moving to the second stage, where we'll begin to become aware of the glow around us. This is the transformation, modification of the light that's coming into you. When it hits us, it is partially reflected, it is partially absorbed. And that reflection, that's what makes the glow. That literally, we will radiate the light constantly, whether it's reflective light, but we also generate light. Our cellular machinery producing energy actually, believe it or not, generates photons all the time. Of course, on a purely objective level, it's not visible, but we can think of magnifying this impact, magnifying this effect. So now you're no longer passive receiver of the light, you're actually active engager. You're engaging in the practice. And now shift sensing of this glow into your heart. And if you pay particular attention, you will realize that, in fact, that's where most of the light centered. Of course, it's not limited to the heart, but that's where it's easy to sense. And you can imagine your heart being like a sun, where you have rays of light radiating from your heart in all directions. And so let's take our time here to get deeper into this aspect of practice where we bring the light in on an inhale, and then on an exhale, we radiate it out. If it helps, inhale through the nose and exhale through the mouth. And you're more than welcome to feel this radiating of light from inside of you into other parts of your body. You can try to radiate the light from your eyes, maybe from your third eye, but from any other part. Maybe tune into whatever is calling you and see how this shift makes you feel. If you have any changes in how body feels, into the thoughts that may be coming your way, or emotions, or how you just feel in the moment. If you want, you can open your eyes if it actually helps you to literally radiate the light through the open eyes, or you can keep them closed, whatever you're called to feel. And as you experiment with different parts of your body radiating the light, see if you can imagine or perceive that your entire body radiates light constantly. you're basically becoming a micro sun in your own way. Sensing that there's a tiny rays of sun coming from in all directions from all parts of your body, creating a kind of a cocoon of light around you. So now, without losing the sensation of this light cocoon, you can let go of trying to imagine that you're radiating light and just be present to this state of or you're not imagining, you're sensing that you're inside this light. And let's spend a couple of minutes just being aware of it, maybe sensing how we feel, maybe contemplating on how our emotions shifted, how our thoughts shifted, how is our physical sensations of different parts of our body shifting. Maybe you relaxed deeper. Maybe your constant flow of thoughts slow down a bit. Maybe emotionally you feel more neutral. Maybe you feel lifted up. Maybe you feel lighter and less tension in different parts of your body. Whatever it is that you're feeling, just let's stay present to that. In a couple of minutes, we're going to come back to our usual state of awareness. But before we do that, see if you can try to remember this state that you're feeling. See if you can identify yourself with it deeper, so that if you're ever going to do this practice again, it will come to you quicker. It'll come to you more intuitive and with less work needed to be put into this. So let's gradually begin to come back. It's helpful to move your body a little bit. Maybe if you sit it, move your neck. Maybe wiggle, if you're laying down, wiggle your fingers and toes a little. Take a couple of deep breaths. And come back. And before we finish, if anyone feels cold, go ahead and put a couple of words in the chat on how you feel. I think that would be good for us to see. For me, this practice always releases my mental racing of thoughts and kind of slows everything down and helps me to recenter. It's not actually maybe your experience. Thank you, Lisa. Bliss is a great state. I think we all would want more of that in our life. Reset, relaxed. Warm, wonderful. So you can take this practice of course, more as a just visualization, or you can take it a bit more literal. In certain esoteric tradition of Hindu practices, as well as Sufism, this is a literal practice that especially if you're on a healing path, that you would practice to attract more energy, in essence, and realize that we carry a lot more energy than we allow ourselves to believe. So it tends to help to concentrate on that. So thank you very much. I'm glad that some of you like this. It is a bit out there. This is not the easiest practice. If there's an interest in a couple of months, I'll repeat it. Just like sometimes I repeat the elemental breath practice that we've done several times before. And we're right at the hour. Thank you so much, Janet, for putting what's next week. We will be working on getting mind-body practitioner, but our wellness person will be Dr. Reza Eftekar, who's been on this podcast before. You love him. I'm sure he's going to talk about posture and muscle tension and all things chiropractic. And thank you, Jennifer, for such a wonderful review. I actually have a question, but I'll defer because I can always ask the question, but I'll defer it to some other time. I kind of really like the conversation of heat and cold, and I want us to keep going there because I have some mental dissonance about that in myself. So I want to, at some point, resolve it. But everybody have a great time. I think the weather is going to be reasonable. So make sure you're out there, outside, enjoying cold and warm or neutral, whatever. And we'll see you all next week.
Okay.
Bye, everyone.
Bye. Thanks, Jennifer, for clarifying ghee and the Ethiopian Eritrean way of making.
Absolutely. No, I was glad to learn about that. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.